Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back, everyone. Sorry, I'm not sure what happened, but we're going to keep going. So, I was asking Michael a little bit about this new Democratic coalition, what it looks like. Is it the overeducated, college focused, coalition of 2025? And Michael was saying yes. So I'll let you continue.
Yeah, no, I'll sort of just, yes, I think what has happened in the last 10 years is that suburban, educated white voters have moved from, not to cite, I mean, they've moved pretty dramatically, I'd say, from the Republican Party to the Democratic Party. So, not all of them, obviously, but Democrats now do better with this constituency than they had before. And that, I think, matters in two respects. One is it really helps you in off-year elections, in midterm elections, special elections, because again, as I said earlier, these are the people who vote. These people who consistently vote in every election. So that's one thing. The second thing is it gives Democrats a real inroad in places, suburban, like in Pennsylvania, outside of Philadelphia, you have places like Montgomery County and Delaware County. I mentioned earlier in Wisconsin, you have the WOW counties around Milwaukee. In Michigan, you have Macomb County and Oakland County. Even in the red states, you're seeing some of this happening as well. It's one of the reasons why, in Tennessee, you had this Democrat candidate do a little bit better because could run a little better with some of these sort of upscale, educated suburban voters, and not always suburban, but tend to be upscale and educated. So I think that gives Democrats a real, boost, and it gives them a pretty solid foundation because you're talking about voters. You got this group of voters, plus you have minority voters, black voters who are the most loyal constituency of the Democratic Party and tend to also vote at pretty large numbers. So it gives them a good starting point, I think, to try to win back power in 26 and 28. Now, the flip side, of course, is that Republicans have made inroads. Well, I should say this: Americans have continued to consolidate their hold among sort of working class voters. But one thing that's interesting is that in 24, like we'll talked about, Republicans doing better with younger voters and with Hispanic voters. Boy, that faded pretty quickly, didn't it? So Hispanic voters, the numbers with Trump's numbers are atrocious, and with young voters, they're even worse. Actually, I think I've ever seen a candidate fall this dramatically, 30 or 40 point shift from 24 among younger voters. I'm sorry, not 24, from the beginning of the year, from sort of February and March. So this is a real problem for Republicans. I think Democrats have a much stronger base in 26. Now, when at 28, the big question for Republicans is, can they keep winning these occasional voters, which is really the key to Trump's victories in 20 and 24 and 16. He won voters who just don't vote in any election, but are Trump-only voters. The problem for Republicans is they've not shown any ability to mobilize those voters when Trump is not on the ticket. And I think that's a real problem for them down the road, that they don't have the ability to win over those occasional Trump voters. And if they can't win them over, I think they have a real problem going to 26 and then to 28.
You think that, so back to 68.
Sure, always.
And Nixon laid out the silent majority.
Yeah.
And there's an argument that over time, that part of the country did kind of leave the Democratic coalition. And that's what we're talking about. Do you think this affordability agenda offers a way to try to win back some of that coalition, or is this more illusory as an issue?
I don't want to say it's illusory, but I do think I'm skeptical a little bit about this because, look, if you look at the last 4 presidential elections, after 2012, you went Democrat, Republican, Democrat, Republican. So changing party every 4 years. That has not happened. It should be every 3, basically changing. You've had 2 one-term presidents in the last, 5 years. We had 3 in the 20th century, I believe. So that suggests to me that it's much more anti-incumbency that's driving our nation's politics these days than any particular issue. And conversely, if you look at 2016, 20, and 24, you had each party won a governing trifecta. So that means both chambers of Congress and the presidency. Republicans in 2016, Democrats in 20, Democrats in 2024. That has never happened in American politics, that kind of a shift, that dramatic of a shift. So that to me suggests that anti-incumbency is a much bigger driver than any particular policy issue. And I think affordability is a good issue to hit Trump on because people have said about the economy. But ultimately, I do think that what's really driving these changes is that people are upset with the status quo, and they put somebody new into power. They cannot change the status quo because our system is so, um, what's the word? Kludgified or kludge? It's kludgy, I guess is the word. It's like a political science word, right?
Right.
Right. Yeah. Um, it's so immune to like significant change, both policy wise and politically wise. And that's, you look at partisan gerrymandering, you look at uh, how few seats are actually up for grabs in any given election. It's really hard to change the political system just through voting. And so I think people get dismayed when they vote for a new party in power and nothing actually changes. And so I do think that's a little bit of what's happening here. And so I'm not saying I don't think the affordability issue is an issue, and I think Democrats should run on it. But I'm not convinced that it's a more potent issue than the just general, I don't know, disappointment in what's happening in the nation's politics.
Which has been a powerful argument for decades already,
Yeah, but
as a basic political argument.
well, yeah, towards it's been right. Candy incumbency has been a thing forever, but I don't know that. And you tell me
Yeah.
if you can think of a similar period in which any incumbency was seen to be such a big driver of what's happening in the nation's politics. I can't think of anything sort of similar to this.
Yeah, I mean, there is obviously some of that in the '70s, both in Congress. I mean, that's the whole reforms of the post Watergate are in part anti-incumbent, anti-old senior Southerners, and then obviously Carter, in some ways, I don't know how you see him, is in part capturing that. But now it's
Yeah, sure.
yeah,
I think
now
a sort of
it's
an anti-establishment voice. Yeah,
yeah.
right.
And now we have much narrower majorities both in Congress and also in the electoral college. So it's a
Right.
kind of powerful way to swing politics both ways.
Right. I looked at something recently that
Yeah.
something like 30, there were 30 in 1976, which is a very close election, something like 30 states
Mm.
were decided by less than 10 points. It was 13 in 2024. So the number of close electoral college states has just diminished dramatically. And I'm just curious, when you tell your students that from 1954 to 94,
Yeah.
Democrats controlled the House for all 40 years and the Senate for 26 years, they look at you like in complete amazement that that was ever possible.
Totally. I mean, that's not a world for anyone who follows politics even a little. That's not a conceivable world for
It's
them.
not. I
And
know
it's
it's
also
not.
it's a different kind of politics when one party controls it all the time. The incentives are different. The idea that Republicans literally would never win is so different than a generation. Not even nine. I mean, the classes now aren't thinking 94 on. They're thinking
Right.
even further down the line when it's switching all the time.
Like since 2006, right? It's basically changes every 2 years, more or less. At least one chamber seems to
Yeah,
change constantly. And we grew up, you and I grew up in an era when like literally nothing changed in Washington. I mean, the Senate was controlled by Democrats for what, 26 years, I think it was, something like that,
yeah,
24 years.
yeah.
So it's just a very different world now, and a world in which power shifts so dramatically, even within like, 2 to 4 years.
And so, speaking of Congress, what do you think of the ongoing leadership debate of how now we're a year out, how Senator Schumer and Representative Jeffries, how they have handled their job in Trump 2.0?
I mean, I, you know, you could say Democrats are doing well in special elections; they're well positioned. The problem is that if you're in the minority in the Senate or the House, you just don't have a lot of power, and it's hard to influence the debate. Having said that, I mean, look at this healthcare issue. Democrats have really won on this healthcare issue over the past couple of months, and I think you got to give some credit to Democrats in the Senate and the House for that. Now, I didn't think it's more Republican incompetence than anything else, but they've held their troops together. That is impressive, but it's a lot easier to do now than it was 30 or 40 years ago when you had different wings of the party. Now everyone's pretty much relatively closely politically aligned, I would say. There's not really a big, centrist wing in the Democratic Party or even a far left wing in the Democratic Party, at least in Congress. So I think they're doing fine. I mean, I think the big question is really a question of recruitment. And there I give Schumer a little bit of credit. He did get Roy Cooper to run in North Carolina, is considered the best bet to take that seat back for Democrats. You got Sherrod Brown in Ohio. You got Janet Mills running in Maine, although she may not win the primary against Graham Plattner. I mean, I think by and large they've done a good job of recruiting. Whether it's enough to win the Senate, I'm skeptical. Because it would take a real wave to win back the Senate in 2026 for Democrats. Not impossible, but certainly difficult. But by and large, I think they've done as well as they can do with the hand they've been dealt, which is not a great one.
And then I have another question that I get asked all the time, but now I can ask you. Before I
Sure.
do, let me thank everyone all the subscribers who are watching us have the conversation. And sorry for that glitch. And paid subscribers, we really thank you for supporting our Substacks. That's how this all works. And we hope some of you might consider becoming paid subscribers to
Absolutely.
have more conversations like this. I get asked all the time, I'm sure you do, how does this moment compare to 1968 or to the late 60s, early 70s, some variation of that. And I'm curious, since you wrote a book on that year and on that election, how do you see not just the Democrats, but the kind of moment we're in historically? How does it compare to that?
I always used to resist the comparison to 68 because I would always say, in 68, there was 500,000 American troops fighting in Vietnam. There was, two major political assassinations, MLK and RFK. There was the longest period of sustained violence since the Civil War in American history. That was right after the assassination of MLK. So, in the sense of like violence and instability in the country, I don't think it's comparable. But having said that, the level of partisanship and polarization is like nothing. Is like it seems worse than 68. And I think the long term threats to American democracy are so much greater now than they were then. I mean, I think the threat there was just a real lack of belief in the political system and a real sense of dismay at the war and the inability to stop the war in Vietnam. Although, you could argue that certainly the process of stopping the war began in 68 when LBJ stepped down. Um, but now it just feels like, and I'm sure you have this feeling too, you see things happening in Washington that in any normal world would be huge scandals and are basically forgotten within a day or two. And I think that's the big difference, that we've become inured to a level of dysfunction, a level of uh, norm breaking, norm shattering, norm violating that, again, I think would have been unimaginable to us in our earlier life, and now it's just become sort of the background of American politics. So I think in that sense, um, we're in a rare place right now in American history, not a good place. And I just think it's also like it's just depressing when you see someone like Trump go around, and I keep coming back to this thing he said about Rob Reiner, 2 weeks ago. That was so horrifically awful and just was kind of forgot within a day or two. I mean, we just have become inured to just really, really bad behavior by the President of the United States. And I don't know. It's not like anything I've ever seen before in my life. That's for sure.
No, I think you're right. I watched, there's a documentary on, I can't remember which, maybe HBO or one of those, on Yoko Ono and John Lennon in 1971 and 72 in Greenwich Village when they moved there. It's
Really?
really phenomenal. It captures New York in that period, but two things. One, it captures kind of the threat of violence that just hung over the air all the time in
Absolutely.
politics. And so there was an eerie, I'm not one to say because something's happened, I feel better when it's happening again, but you kind of see a climate that's very reminiscent of some of what we feel today. But also, I mean, the whole movie revolves around Lennon trying to do this concert to basically support the Democratic Party and to raise opposition to Richard Nixon and the war as it was unfolding, but through the conventional political process.
Right.
So
Right.
even Lennon at that time was still working within the parameters
Within
of
the system. Yeah.
yeah. So it's kind of interesting. Anyway, just to close, um, something. All right, so we've covered where the Democrats are. I had two questions here. We have a few minutes. One
Sure.
last thing I didn't answer: what the abundance, which again, it's been the theme of the year, the abundance crowd, Ezra Klein, Derek Thompson, all of that. What's your take on that? Not, politically, not so much as an argument that government should be
Oh,
better.
yeah, I just say as a policy argument, I have no problem with it. As a political argument, it's not a winner. I mean, I don't think people just don't, it's too what's the word I'm looking for? It's too distant, I guess, from what people think, from people's daily lives. And I don't think people, the abundance crowd seems to have an assumption of po- policy knowledge among the electorate that I don't think actually exists. And I just think that you can running on that is not a way to win political office. Right now, the way to win, if you're a Democrat, to win political office is to run against Donald Trump. Period. That's it. You could talk about affordability, and I'm all for that. But ultimately, what is driving the nation's politics is opposition to Trump. And when the incumbent president is at 36% in the Gallup poll for 2 straight months, right, that's what you're running on, not this sort of esoteric idea of abundance. Again, I'm not criticizing the idea itself. I want government to work better too. Everyone should. But as a political argument, to me, it's a non-starter.
Final question. We're both deadheads. Are you a Jerry or Bobby guy? And what's your
Jerry.
favorite song?
Jerry always. Jerry always.
Do you have a favorite song?
I mean, I guess if push comes to shove, I'd probably say Scarlet Fire is where I sort of I land. But that's going to change from day to day. Right now, I've been listening to a lot of Broke Down Palaces, so it changes all the time.
Depends on the mood of the moment.
Exactly.
All right. Well, I'm a Jerry guy too, so that makes this even better.
There you go.
Thanks for joining, and we'll talk again soon, Michael.
Absolutely, Julian. It was a pleasure. Happy New Year. Bye-bye.